You're listening to The Moose and the Loose, your 10 minutes action-packed financial podcast with your host, Mikey Hu. Hey, what's up, Market Moose? Mike from The Moose on the Loose. I hope you're doing well on this Wednesday. I hope that you are preparing your portfolio for winter because winter is coming. Actually, we don't even know if it's coming or not. Trump just said, yeah, maybe we're gonna have like the tariffs at the beginning of February 1st. Like, what is going to be part of those tariffs, how it's going to play out, still uncertain. And actually, it's going to like jump from like one day to another. You're going to have a different version. So I'm not going to do a follow-up on that story until we have clear rules, because at this point, my friend, it is just noise. However, the solution to cutting off that noise and to make sure that your portfolio is good is, of course, to have a great diversification. So I asked myself, like, is it possible to have a 100% Canadian portfolio that would be geographically diversified? So not just companies operating in Canada, but actually Canadian companies with an exposure to the US, but also to international markets. So in other words, like how big your companies in your portfolio are making money in Canada, how much they are exposed to potential tariffs in the US, and if they have like any other doors open to other countries to maybe try to find other growth vectors. So what I did is I started with the Rockstar List. The Rockstar List, as you know, is a list of about 300 stocks, not all Canadians, of course, that shows a positive dividend triangle. So companies with robust financial metrics, with revenue, earnings per share, and dividend growth over the past 5 years. You can actually download this list for free at moosemarkets.com/rockstars. So I started to work on that list, and then I went like sector by sector. Why? Because just looking at the entire list would have like given me headaches. And when you're trying to do this kind of work, you want to go like step by step, because the next thing that you will have to do is to look at the geo diversification for each of those companies. And unfortunately, the best way to find that out is to look into financial statements. So that's like a tall order. And of course, I'm pretty sure I am going to miss a few of those. So that's why I encourage you to download the list. Again, it's at moosemarkets.com/rockstars to do that research. But it's going to be like a fun exercise that we're going to do today and tomorrow. A few sectors that have like not much interest here: communication, energy sector, healthcare, and REITs. Well, of course, communication sector is like really in Canada. Healthcare, there's nothing in dividend payers. In terms of REITs, not that much. You do have a few international REITs, but I decided to skip those. And then in the energy, well, they could sell oil and gas to the US, but we're trying to find companies with a more wider diversification. So let's start with consumer discretionary. In consumer discretionary, there are like 4 companies actually. One is not in the part of the Rockstar List, but we have Gildan Activewear, GIL.TO, but it's mostly US. Sometimes you have to be careful with this. Like when you see the narrative, you're going to think, oh, wow, that's well diversified. And then when you look at the numbers, I mean, this one is about 80% of the revenue is coming from the US, 7.5 from international, and the rest from Canada. So really, Gildan Activewear is a play on the US. Similar to BRP, for famous Ski-Doos, right? DOO.TO, 60% of revenue are coming from the US, 24 international, and only 16% from Canada. So it's kind of interesting where it is a Canadian company, but doesn't get much revenue from their own country. Most of it is coming from the US, but it's still they have like a good open door into the international market. My favorite by far would be Dollarama in terms of investment. investment if you look at the dividend triangle, the business model, and everything. But when you're thinking, oh, but they're like, of course, based in Canada, doing a lot of business over there, but they do have a participation in Dollar City, which is expanding in Central America, but that counts about for like 5 to 10% of their revenues. So when you're thinking about like, oh, international exposure, well, 5 to 10%, not going to move the needle that much, right? If we have problems in Canada. So good news for you, though, if you are afraid of tariffs. Well, Dollarama has no exposure to the US, and I don't think they're going to go there. So that could be one that should be on your list. That could be interesting. Magna International, it's not part of the Rockstar list because it has weaker metrics, but I mean, it's a big company. It is very well diversified. So we're talking about like 10% Canada, 25% US, 38% Europe, some Asian countries as well. So definitely an interesting play on geographic diversification. Not so much if you look at the financial metrics, though. On the consumer staple sides, we do have Couche-Tard at 69% exposed to the US sector. Some international that's growing as well. So that would probably drop the exposure to the US. But at this point, Couche-Tard, definitely a play on the US more than anything else. So you have to be careful on this one too. But if you want to compare to Casey's General Stores, that could be interesting because Casey's having like better metrics right now and better performance, and they are also in the US. So sometimes it's good to be able to compare when you know which kind of business model you look at. An interesting one in the consumer staples would be Jameson Wellness, 57% Canadian, 27% US, and the rest is international, including 10% in China. So Jameson Wellness, they're selling supplement and vitamins. They have made a lot of marketing effort to grow and expand their market outside of Canada. They're quite successful. It's still a small cap. Be careful about that. But this one is quite interesting if you're looking at geographic diversification. We're going to end up this part with the financial sector because, of course, tomorrow we have like plenty of plenty of other sectors to cover. But in the financial sector, I found that it was quite interesting because, of course, we have like our good old Canadian banks that are, I mean, you have Scotiabank that is exposed to the international market, but I don't see that as an added value at this point. National Bank, the US and international segments starting to like bringing some pretty good numbers, but again, not that great. If I would be looking for geographic diversification, I would probably go for a life insurance company. When you look at Manlife, 31% of business made in Asia, 26 in the US, 22 in Canada, and then 20% is like asset management. So really their insurance business is like almost 1/3 in Asia, 1/4 in US, 1/4 in Canada. So very interesting business model here. For Sun Life, we do have 33% Canadian from Canada, 22 in the US, 15 in Asia, and then 30% is asset management. So the life insurance business, 20% US, 15 Asia, so 35, 37% diversification here. And then finally, Great West, you do have a play that is interesting because this time we're not talking about Asia, but Europe. So 21% Europe, 27% US, and then 32 Canada with 22% with asset management. So another one that could be interesting. Another business that I really like, that I probably prefer a little bit more over life insurance companies, because since they are like part of like about 1/3 of their business is around asset management, I still prefer banks for doing this. But Intact Financial, of course, dominant in Canada, about 69% of their revenue, so a little bit more than 2/3 from Canada, but still 17% of their premiums are written in the UK, 14% in the US. So you still have like about a 30% international exposure. That could be interesting as well. And finally, probably the most diversified company that you can find is Brookfield Corporation, and this one is doing businesses in so many countries across so many different segments that it's even hard to identify where the revenue and the assets are coming from. So this one, I'll let you dig in because I could do a complete episode on Brookfield Corporation, but that would be another interesting one in the financial sector. So to wrap this up, we do have some consumer discretionary. Most of them, though, are not that diversified outside of the US. So big exposure to Canada and US there. Magna International is probably the best one, but like not really looking good these days. My favorite pick would be Dollarama, but this one is definitely not diversified enough to be included in that discussion. Consumer staples, small cap with Jameson Wellness, well diversified. Couche-Tard a little bit, but not too much. Of course, grocery stores would not show much diversification outside of Canada, right, with Loblaws, Metro, and Empire. On the financial sector, we do have life insurance companies, Brookfield, that are doing a great job there. Canadian banks, to a smaller extent, most of them are just like going to the US, like Scotiabank. I don't think it has been a success story for them, so I'm not too sure it's an added value. So that's pretty much it. So far, it's all right, but it's pretty thin, right? Tomorrow, we're going to look at the industrial sector, technology, materials, and utilities. So a lot more companies to discuss. But again, I don't think you'll be able to complete a full portfolio just based on geographic diversification. So right, Moose, that's enough for today. We're going to talk again tomorrow. And until then, don't forget to stay invested. Hey, welcome to the disclaimer. If you're listening to The Moose and the Loose, you cannot really expect me to give you buy or sell recommendation or financial advice, right? You're here for fun, you're here for information and some entertainment. But I am not your financial advisor, I am not your broker, so therefore I'm not liable if you're losing money after listening to the podcast. If you're looking for some advice, go see a professional. If not, you can enjoy this show and do your due diligence after it.